Alright everyone, today I'm going to be finishing off the side that I've been working on this car. I've got the panels made up ready and I'm about to weld them on. So I'm going to show you what I've been up to. Right, currently I've got all the pieces clamped in place about where they need to be anyway. This was actually the first piece I made on this job. I've refined it a little since then. There's a bit of a naughty gap there, but I'll just have to weld it up. I'm not remaking it. I've got that piece to weld in there just to close that off and to weld to that. I've got the I decided to make that brace rather than reuse the old one. There was a little bit of rust on it, so I've got that all nice and new. And the chassis leg piece here, that was the trickiest piece because I made it out of 2mm steel. It's maybe a bit thicker than it needs to be, but it allowed me to have a bit of room to work with to sand it smooth, and obviously once I've welded it to flush that off. It was tricky making that. It took a lot of iterations. I started off using the press brake I made just to put a few folds in it, and then I started hammering things around. I curled the edges up further than they needed to be, and I made it bigger than it needed to be so that I knew once I'd got this shape right, then I could get the edges to fit right. So it worked pretty well. It was tricky because it has to sit flush against that, and also has to have a decent edge at the top. That does go up a bit tighter. A decent edge there, and obviously to line up everywhere else as well, and to line up with that to get welded onto there as well. So there was quite a lot to it, and it bends in 3 dimensions. I had to stretch this a bit. That was the only bit that I heated. Stretched that out a little bit. It was almost there, but there was a few times when I was making it when I thought there's no way I'm going to be able to get this. I'm going to have to make it out of multiple pieces or whatever, because it was just an absolute mile off. But I just kept at it, and like I'd put the creases in, and then I'd try and form this, and then the creases would flatten out, so I'd put the creases back in again, and it kept going back and forth like that, and eventually it ended up pretty damn perfect. I should be able to get that looking nice once it's welded up. I still need to drill holes for the spot welds on here and there, and in that panel and that panel as well. There's a couple in this panel that aren't actually needed. I got a bit carried away with the hole punch. I think I'm going to have to weld up 4 or 5 holes on that one. Well, that's easy enough, I'll do that on the bench. And then obviously the hole for the suspension bolt needs to be put in, and there's an alignment hole that needs to go in as well to make it look right, and one on the side here. I could put them on afterwards, but they don't quite line up right as factory, so if I want it to look exactly right, I should make them look a bit wrong. It's a bit backwards, but I might do that. So yeah, next step is to drill all the holes for the spot welds, and then I guess just weld it on. Right, holes drilled and ready for welding. Right, that's the next piece clamped on. I've got as much paint as I can between these panels behind here, but it'll all burn off where the weld is anyway, so I'll have to do some painting after the weld inside all these gaps somehow. Probably just cavity wax for the most part. But someone did bring up, do I paint behind the panels? I do and I don't, because it can affect the quality of the weld if the paint gets dragged into the weld from the back, which it probably will if you're getting full penetration. So it's best to paint afterwards because you have to anyway. But like the channel in here behind there, I managed to get a decent bit of paint in because obviously I wouldn't be able to do that afterwards very easily, not without drilling loads of holes in it anyway. I had these panels just a tiny bit too close there. After putting a couple of tack welds on, the tack welds had shrunk a bit and pulled the panel to the point where it was
warping slightly because it was pressing against each other. The two panels were pressing against each other, so I'm able to get through a hole in the floor and hammer on dolly on the spot welds to just stress relieve them and stretch them out a bit more, and after that then I can line the panels up flush again, flat with each other, because they were pressing against each other before and they were popping one side or the other. I find with really thin sheet metal like this, it's best to tack onto the rod and let the rod flow into the metal. That way you don't blow a big hole in it, because it's just so thin that it will do that every time, unless it's a perfect gap. You are meant to leave a little bit of a gap between two panels when you're welding them, so that when you weld it, it can shrink and the two panels don't press against each other and warp it as you go. But with something this thin, I find it's best to just push them up as tight as you can to avoid it blowing through, because if it blows through and you have to weld up the hole that's blown through, it's going to warp more than it would have done had you not just pushed them up together in the first place and dealt with it as you go.
Well, that's one side finished, finally. This weld could have been a bit better. It's a little bit dented in places and warped. Probably should have given up and used the MIG welder instead of the TIG, but I got it. It looks kind of nice. So I've welded that in, that, and then previous to that, this piece of chassis leg. These welds here are around about the same as what's remaining on this side. There was nothing remaining on that side. That was all gone. But for those of you who haven't been following this from the start, around about here is where the old metal stops and the new metal starts, and it goes all the way around there. You can see that line. That piece is new, across there, all the way up there, all around there, and this entire mount area and all the layers behind and all the way through into the cabin. Hopefully I can find some old footage now to show you what it was like and the stages that I've gone through to get here. It's took some doing to get to this stage. I've certainly become better for having done this job. I've improved my skills. All of the welds in this are either spot welds or flush butt welds. There's no welds on corners or anything like that. All the panels were formed as they should be. And the spot welds are all where the factory spot welds should be. There's a couple of lap joints that crept in early on, but that's not the end of the world. Everything you can see there is all my handiwork. I've hammered and bent that out with my bare hands and a few tools, not some power tools. But I am very proud of that. There were definitely points in this job where I wasn't quite sure if I could see it through, but now I've got one side done, I know I can do it. All the hurdles are done. It's doable. It took all my metalworking skills that I currently have, but I'm quite happy with that. If you want to see how I've got to this stage, there's a playlist for this job, so you can go through pretty much everything. I don't think I'll video the other side, at least not anything the same as what I've already done, because two reasons: one, it'll get done quicker if I don't, and two, I've already done it. So hopefully the next video will be finishing it up, painting it, putting it back together, or something like that. So I guess that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more. See ya.